Hey everyone, it's Dane again. Tonight we are on part 2 of our PS1 digital install. Last time we disassembled the PS1 and we removed all the components that need to go to make way for our actual mod install, which we're going to do tonight, so let's get to it. Alright, first things first, let's see what is in our PS1 digital kit. Alright, so here we have all of our flex cables. These are what we're going to be installing first, so we'll set that aside. Looks like this is the actual PS1 digital board itself. Very cool. Got the Wi-Fi antenna, which we can use for doing updates. And finally, we have the actual HDMI port and the spacers that we will put under our board when we install it. So we need to get into these flex cables here. Careful when you're opening this. Looks like it'd be kind of easy to tear into your flex cable. You can see that there, but so yeah, I'm going to cut that instead. All right, we have surmounted the challenge of getting these flex cables out of the plastic bag. So next we want to go ahead and start removing these. So we're going to push from the bottom, and there's little points along here where it connects. So we're just going to grab a hold of that and start pulling, and not going real hard. Okay, there's our GPU flex cable. That is going to be some very fine pitch soldering when we get to it. So there's our flex cable. This would be our controller flex cable. And this is how PS1 digital board will know how to use your controller input commands. And then we have our audio. And this is the digital port flex cable here. Cool. All right, so first thing we are going to do is hook up our flex cable here, and that is going to sit something like this. Now, in order to get that to stay, I think what I will do is go ahead and tack down, or actually just put a blob of solder in one of these small contact points, and then I should just be able to lay it right down on top. Go ahead and get cracking. So we're just gonna, a little bit of flux right there. And let's go ahead and put a drop in. Okay, that should be good enough to get us started. Take our flex cable. All right, so we just need to pre-tin our iron and then get that flex cable put into place. That looks pretty good. So I'm gonna put a little more flux back on there on the whole thing, and weld the rest of that into place. It does kind of pop up a little bit. Right, that looks pretty good. Next, we will do our controller input. So you can flip your board around. It is going to be this bit right here, and it is marked CN102, at least on this particular motherboard. And these first couple are pretty big pins you're soldering to, so pretty easy. Okay, there we go. So there is enough room to get the cable on the outside of this component right here. Yeah, same sort of deal. So I'm going to hit the board with some flux, pre-tin my iron, and then we will get our controller flex cable installed. Not super happy with how that fit in there quite. A little trickier to get on there than I kind of expected, just because of that component. All right, there we go. That one's in place. Let's see if I can get these other ones tacked in there too. Interesting. Not really. Plan B. I'm not going to worry about getting on the outside of that other component right now. I'm just going to try to make sure there's enough room. I think I need something to go a little bit better handle on that cable there. Also on these ribbons, they will say which side is up. Like on this one, it basically tells you which which side to solder. That's interesting. This cable is a little trickier to get in place than I expected. Okay, those welds look good now. Now for the other side. Alright, let's take a peek. So, the thing that was tricky about that one was that I actually had it a little closer on this side, which meant there's a little bit bigger gap to clear over on this side. I think that should all be good to go, but yeah, that's kind of tricky to hold in place. Alright, moving on. So next we will do our audio cable. It's one that has the hole in it, and that, as far as I know, is supposed to go in this position, but that looks a little weird, so I'm going to double check. Okay, yeah, I checked my reference, and that is the correct spot for that cable. The issue is that there is a cutout for these two very small components here, but there is another large component here, so the cable doesn't really sit flat. So I think I'm almost going to have to come at it at sort of an angle to get it to sit right. Yeah, you almost just kind of have to hold it in place like that, which I think if I do, it will be fine, actually. Because what you do is sort of butt those pads right up against pins of the audio IC here. So that's what I'm going to try to do. This one's going to be tricky, so I think I'm going to pre-tin just a tiny bit, just a little bit on my iron on the bottom side, and hopefully I can sort of guide that into place. Alright, try to show you how I tack that on there. So yeah, now I just have to go in and hit the rest of those pins. Yeah, this one's tricky. This is actually kind of tricky. I think the key on this one is lots of flux. Alright, I think that's pretty good. Yeah, that one's kind of challenging to get in there. We're getting smaller now. We sort of started large here with the flex for the data port, a little bit smaller on the controller, and now down on the audio one, that's pretty small. Let's get in there and take it. So you can see that's pretty fine pitch stuff, but not impossible. You know, that's not, it's definitely not impossible to get in there and do. And it looks like on mine, looks like there's 2 pins left on the outside. In the instructions, it did say it would do that. Okay, save the hard one for last. Next up, we have our GPU cable that has to attach here. And this is some very fine pitch soldering. I have done stuff this small before, but it is always a challenge. You just have to go very slow. I don't recommend drag soldering with this sort of thing. In fact, even just trying to make sure you have the thing lined up right is tricky. Let me just get out my magnifying glass and look under there. And that would be lined up, except that this has to, it can't sit up high like that. It has to, you know, similar to the audio one, it has to sit flush right down like that. So really, the first touch with this is going to be the critical component, because you kind of want to hit the middle and work your way out, so you don't end up sort of binding the whole thing up and getting it in a weird spot. You know, if you start at one end, it might not be aligned down at the other by the time you get there. This one is going to be a challenge, because yeah, with all these other components in the way, it is very tricky to get that line up. I wish it could just sort of sit flat like this, but there's actually a very small ground plane here that we also want to connect to. Actually, there's one on both sides. There's one here and one here. Let's see if I can show you. All right, so all the way down here, you can see that that isn't a leg of the IC, that's just a ground plane. We want to connect there, and there's one here that we also want to connect to. Then we have to solder all the rest of it. There's very few things that actually make me nervous working on stuff like this these days. This is one that's close. Because if you mess this up, it's going to be a big hassle to try to fix it up. There's our flux. Alright, and that's pretty much lined up. Alright, and we are tacked. We are tacked down. So I put just a very small amount of solder on the iron and then tacked it down in the middle. You can see so far no bridges, and you can see that our pins are lined up exactly where they need to be. So now the trick is really going to be just moving slowly. What I like to do, I usually use these chisel tip irons, and you know, if you come at it from an angle, it's flat. And you can just sort of push up against the bottom of those pins. It's not drag soldering, but it kind of lets you hit a couple pins at once. And if you've got enough flux on there, you'll be good. But yeah, with this, you definitely want to keep the flux on the board. And again, when I put a little bit of solder on my iron, well, there we go. I already just bridged a whole bunch. That's all right. No need to panic. We'll take care of that as we go. Oh yeah, that's a big fun solder blob to take care of. You know, those ones, usually try to avoid using desoldering grade on a flex cable like this, but that's a big enough glob on there that I'm going to attempt to use that method to just pull the excess away. I'll show you what I'm working with here. So if you get one of these, don't panic. We'll just go in and remove that extra solder. No big deal. Just use plenty of flux. All right, that's a good start. There's still just a little bit left on there. There's still one tiny little bridge. And you can see while I'm doing this, I'm really not trying to leave it on there too much. In fact, that last little bit, just a little bit of flux might take care of it. So. Okay, so big solder bridge is taken care of, no sweat. Now let's finish tacking the rest of this into place. Starting to dry out a little bit, so it's a little more flux. Being very liberal with my use of the flux on this one today. Alright, we actually have a very small ground plane to hit down here as well. I think we're done. I think we got that all hooked up right the way it needs to be. Oop, sorry. Hit the camera with my head there. And actually, I think I may have just caused a solder bridge. Nope, that's good. This is what the connection on the other side looks like there. Alright, there's our graphics cable. That is all hooked up. That is good to go. No bridges.
Hey, Billy! Hey, Joey! Come on in! There's plenty of room! Sorry, not you.
Bridges?
Why not? But you let in Jeff.
It says no.
Bridges?
We're allowed to have one.
I think we are all set. So, that is the hard part, honestly. I think that is going to be the trickiest part of this install, right there. So, next thing, let's take a look at what we need to do to install the motherboard itself. Okay, so next bit we're gonna need is our 3D printed HDMI bracket. We wanna pull off these two little spacers here. Just gonna kind of wiggle them back and forth till they snap off. There we go. And these are going to sit right here. Just like that. Alright, so now let's take a look at our actual HDMI kit. Okay, there is our PS1 HDMI board. Cool looking bit of kit there, huh? Awesome. So this is going to sit down on this part. I'm going to make sure that this kind of pops up through there. But basically, it's going to sit in place like that. And you can see how each of our flex cables is going to bend over and then hook in to these various points. So we will actually go ahead and flip all those up because we'll be connecting those shortly. And before I go any further, I need to look up if you screw this into these points first. I don't remember. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back. I checked that out. As you can see, I actually set the motherboard back down inside the PS1 shell. It needs to be in there for you to be able to screw in your board. But before I get too ahead of myself and install that, real quick, I'm just going to clean up my work with a little bit of alcohol. Just always a good idea. So we'll hit it with the rubbing alcohol. So we'll use a Q-tip here. Alright, so we're just going to clean up where we put all that flux. I use no clean flux. You don't technically have to do this, but it's not a bad idea. It's just good practice in general. More alcohol. We just want to clean all this up. Okay, there we go. Now, let's see about getting this board installed. So we're going to want to make sure that our spacers are sitting right over top of the screw holes. And then we're going to set our mod board right down on there. Okay, that looks lined up pretty good. I think it might need to come up just a touch higher, but we will adjust that some as we screw it in. So let's get this put in place. All right, and I'm not like cranking this down real hard or anything. I just want it to be good enough that it's secure. All right, so our mod board is now securely in place. And again, not like cranking it down, just getting it good enough to keep everything lined up well. And that all looks pretty good. Okay, so next we will be hooking in our flex cables. So let's go ahead and do that next. And I just kind of try to push them in until they stop, and then fold over that top to hold them in place. Sometimes it can be helpful to get in there with a little tool. I'm having trouble getting this one to... There we go. Which I'm not sure I've got that set back in there far enough. Let's open that back up. Maybe I can come at it this way. Oh yeah, much better. There we go. All right, so let's go ahead and hook up our controller next. This one, we're just gonna flip it over 90 degrees. That. And finally, the big scary one. Here's our graphics cable, graphics flex cable, that is. Close that over. And now once we've done that, I'm going to sort of bend this down, increase this just a bit, because we don't want there to be a lot of pressure on those welds on the GPU. There's also, you can see there's a little bit of adhesive under there. Once we've done our test to make sure this works, I'll pull this back apart and actually lock that all the way in. But yeah, guess what? That's the mod. So next we just need to test it out and make sure it works. Okay, so as you can see, we have our HDMI hooked up. We got power hooked in, controller is hooked in, and I have HDMI running out to my capture card. So let's turn this on and see if our mod works. All right, we've got a solid blue light. Oh, saw it for a second. Weird. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and kill that. I'll try that again. It's possible there was a handshake issue. Huh, interesting. Okay, so I'm gonna have to go get out a computer monitor instead of trying to run direct into my capture card and see what's going on here. So go do that. All right, let's try this again. The blue light, we're good. There's our menu. Okay, I don't know what happened last time. I think it was just an HDMI handshake like I thought. Tested this out on an old computer monitor. Totally worked. Check out what these on-screen display settings are like. So in order to engage this, you hit L2 and R2, square and X, then select and start. And that brings up the PS1 digital menu. I'm actually going to expand this window just so we can see a little bit, or at least I can see a little more closely what we're looking at here. So we have output resolution. Right now it's set to 1080p, but we've got VGA 480p and 960 advanced video settings. All right, so we've got color space, all kinds of good stuff. Gamma adjust. Oh, cool. They've got a 480i interlacer. Very cool. Let's check out the scaler settings here. Okay, so it's basically boosting 640 by 480i to 1080p. Makes sense. Got scan lines, which is kind of cool. Check out these scan lines. So turn that on. Looks like that is the thin scan lines. There's thick ones, very thin. And then you can actually change which line they show up on, which is kind of cool. Yeah, so this is super cool. And then we also have the ability to update the firmware and our Wi-Fi stuff, but we can't do that yet because we haven't yet finished up actually installing the Wi-Fi antenna and all that stuff. But we just needed to do our functionality check, make sure nothing was wrong with it. But yeah, this all looks good. So I think we are ready to hit the home stretch and finish out doing our mod.